Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, your source for travel stories, travel destinations, and travel philosophy.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the World Wanderers podcast. This episode is brought to you by the supporters of the show. If you love the show and want to help it grow and move onward to bigger, better things, you can go to patreon.com/theworldwanderers and support and receive some cool bonuses, benefits, and experiences in return. That's patreon.com/theworldwanderers.
So on this episode of the podcast, we're talking about Chiang Mai, and we spent the month of December in Chiang Mai. So this podcast episode is a little bit overdue. We've been meaning to do it for a long time, but we've had lots of awesome guests come on the show, and we've been excited to share those interviews with you. So we finally made time to talk about Chiang Mai because we had a fabulous month in Chiang Mai.
Yeah, and if you survey or poll people around Southeast Asia, where's your favorite city in Southeast Asia? Chiang Mai is going to be on top of that list for a large amount of people. Certainly the people we hang out with.
Yeah.
AKA the cool people.
Okay, yeah, the coolest people.
Where is Chiang Mai? What's the deal? What's going down there? Why do people like it?
So Chiang Mai is in northern Thailand. It's not too far from the Laos border and actually the Myanmar border as well, although it's more challenging to travel to Myanmar by land that way. But so yeah, northern Thailand, it's a massive expat digital nomad hub. It's one of the coolest places that we've been to in Asia. And I think that people like it for the same reason that we liked it. You go there and you get everything else that you get in Thailand. You get delicious street food. You get night markets. You get temples. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of temples in Chiang Mai. It would take ages to see them all. You get the Thai culture, but you also get fabulous restaurants and amazing malls with luxury movies and gluten-free bread and all this other stuff that if you've been traveling for a while or you're looking for somewhere to set up your life abroad, it's like the perfect balance. You get everything that you love from home at Thailand prices. Yeah,
I think you just said it, balance. Like it's a city that really allows you to balance out the comforts of home with new adventures, Thai experiences with Western experiences, all that stuff. There's a really vibrant entrepreneurial culture there because of the location-independent entrepreneurs. So there's meetups, events, lots of ways to learn and connect with people. And it's just a really affordable place to have a very good quality of life. If you're someone who is working remotely, or trying to be a location-independent entrepreneur, you've no doubt heard about Chiang Mai because it's probably the most popular city in the world for that. It's
one of the most popular for sure, if not the.
Yeah. It's a mid-sized city, so it kind of has that feel of like, oh, it's still a small place, but it's big enough that you get everything you need there. And so on the flip side, for travelers, people who are just on vacation, we've heard from quite a few people as well who really like Chiang Mai as a spot to go spend a week or 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got 5 to 10 days there, even 3 to 5 days, I mean, there's tons of things to do to occupy your time. There's temples on the mountain. There's temples within town. There's an old walled city. I mean, there's so many good restaurants, cooking schools. I mean, all the things that we did within a month, if you're not working, you could do in 3 to 5 days.
Yeah, so let's just set the scene for our trip there. We had been previously in Macau and Hong Kong in November. We had that brief detour through Shanghai, and then we were about to go to Myanmar for January and the end of December. So we had a month booked into Chiang Mai. We were going to allegedly focus on work.
Allegedly.
Yeah, we certainly weren't working in a foreign country.
Oh, right. Okay.
We were tourists.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
So we had 30 days booked in Chiang Mai. We found a really cool apartment, and we were going to focus on kind of finding a balance between our responsibilities work-wise and our responsibilities as legit travel people.
Yeah, and if you guys listen to our digital nomad episode, The Reality of Being a Digital Nomad, we talked pretty openly about how it's been one of our biggest struggles over the last 5 months is been finding the balance between moving around a lot and actually getting work done. And so we were both really ready for Chiang Mai. We were both pretty excited to set up kind of a routine, have more of like a normal day-to-day life, and to not have to pack and repack our bags and not to be, staying with other people, just to have our own space to unload and chill and get some stuff done.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. It's actually the longest we've ever spent anywhere up until now in one city while traveling. 1 month in one place. We had never stayed that long anywhere before.
Yeah, I mean, unless you count Atlanta, which wasn't really traveling since you had a job there. So yeah, I mean, when we were in South America, we took 2 weeks in Buenos Aires and we did language school, and it was like, oh, we're settling down, we're not bumping around every 3-4 days. And I feel like South America on a whole was a little bit slower than we did our first trip. And it's really funny to look back on that and just see the evolution of travel. And I think that we may do a podcast episode on that in the future because we've been observing how much we've changed since we started traveling in 2011. But yeah, I was kind of resistant to it at first. Like, you were very much like, this time in Asia is not about traveling. It's about settling down, finding cool places to find community in, getting a lot of stuff done so we could grow our online businesses. And in order to do that, we'd stay put a little bit longer. And it just, as circumstances had it, for the first 2 months of our trip, we bumped around a little bit more than we originally planned. And I was actually finding that pretty exhausting. So by that point, I was not resisting it anymore. I was very ready for some normalcy in my life.
Yeah. So when we planned Chiang Mai, we were going to focus more on work. And so we set out, okay, we're going to set ourselves goals for this month. We wrote down a list of everything we wanted to accomplish, stuck it on the fridge. And then we basically decided we're going to commit firmly to having one day where we're just exploring, just traveling off a week, and then kind of just doing other stuff, playing it by ear, kind of, if we wanted to do an afternoon or something like that. But yeah, let's start on the travel side. What are like the big popular things to do there? What did we do?
So we went to an elephant sanctuary, and Chiang Mai is a really popular place to go see elephants. There's a ton of really sustainable elephant sanctuaries. And so by sustainable, I mean ones that don't necessarily let you ride the elephants in the baskets. They're more about bathing the elephants. Maybe you're not even allowed to get on them. A lot of them, you experience the elephants very much just like in their natural habitat. And so we went to...
Which is being bathed by white girls.
Some of them you can't even do that though. But yeah, we went to the Chai Lai Orchard, which is about an hour and a half, or Chai Lai Orchid, which is hour and a half outside of Chiang Mai, and had an afternoon where you got to bathe and hang out with a 7-year-old elephant, 5-year-old. I think she was still like considered like a kid elephant, but yeah, she was pretty great. That was one of the highlights of the time being in Chiang Mai for sure for me, because it's something that I really wanted to do. When we went to Laos, we rode elephants, but I don't think we went with like a terrible company, but I didn't do as much research into it. When
we were in Laos, we were in Luang Prabang, and we looked around and were looking for a place that had ethical treatment of elephants, and we thought we found one, but then we got there and there was all these things about it that made us feel like maybe they aren't treated so well. So, for example, the mahout's treatment of the elephant we were with was very harsh and aggressive, and you could see the spot on our elephant's forehead where they clearly been used one of those hooks that mahouts can occasionally use. So after that experience, we were like, we don't want to go back to an elephant sanctuary unless they're treating them fairly well. And it's hard to find because businesses in Southeast Asia recognize, okay, tourists want to see ethical treatment of animal stuff, so they can just slap that on their website and
right.
slap the word sanctuary, but it doesn't necessarily mean good things. So it's still a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's a very challenging thing, and people will be like, oh, did you go see like rescued elephants? And it's like, well, most of them are rescued, even in the areas where they're not treated the best. They're still rescued elephants for the most part. Like most of them are bred into that situation. But yeah, definitely do your research. Chai Lai Orchid is a great place. It's run by an American girl and her Burmese husband. He's a Burmese refugee, and they support women who are Burmese refugees. So it's like all the people there are Burmese women who were refugees. And after going to Myanmar, I feel like even better about that situation. So that was definitely a highlight for me.
And that's something that a lot of people do in Chiang Mai, right?
Yeah. Going to some sort of elephant sanctuary. There's quite a few good ones in the Chiang Mai area. So just decide what's going to be best for you if that's something that you do want to do. And the biggest thing I encourage is doing your own research and finding out, what's going to be the best price and the best situation, like based on what you want to do. The ones that are cheaper, though, are definitely probably not the most ethical. It does cost a little bit more money to have the more ethical ones, but I think that it's worth it for sure. Elephants are one of the most amazing creatures in the world. So I couldn't speak more highly about going to do something like that, as long as you do your research.
Yeah, and there's one place in particular that we've heard, we didn't actually go to ourselves, but I've heard nothing but good things from about an elephant sanctuary where you can kind of just go and watch the elephants. And we'll put a link to it in the show notes on theworldwanderers.com. But even for someone like me who's not, like, I'm not the guy who like really wants to go, bathe elephants, but it is amazing to just go be around these gigantic creatures that are
so gentle and so smart. Yeah,
gentle in many ways. I'm sure they'd still smack you around if they were in the wild. But yeah, very they're just weird how they'll go down like steep slopes and place their feet precisely and do all this other interesting stuff. It's just cool to be around. Yeah,
for sure. I've often imagined myself of like, what if I just stayed on one of these places? What if I just stayed at this elephant sanctuary and you see them houts with them and it's like they're BFFs. I want to be like BFFs with an elephant. But yeah, another cool thing that we did is we went to Doi Inthanon National Park. And so that is the highest peak in Thailand, which is actually not that high, but Thailand's a fairly flat sea level country.
Yeah, and Chiang Mai is a higher elevation. So when you're in Chiang Mai, it's very lush and very green, but there's smaller mountains around. It's a little bit cooler. It's not as tropical as the other places. And Doi Inthanon is still, you really get up there. So on the day we went, it was actually very cool because it was cloudy down in the valley in Chiang Mai, but as we went up and up the mountain, we eventually broke through the clouds. So you would have this amazing view where it's kind of like you're on an island, and then all you can see is like this cloud ocean everywhere.
Yeah.
And sunny, beautiful blue skies, and a temperature that was much more moderate.
Yeah, we're really finding that the hotter the place is, the more we really appreciate kind of these cool bursts of air. I know we kind of whined a lot about it in the Shanghai episode, but when we go to really hot places, it's like, oh, I wish it was a little bit cooler. And I forgot how much I miss fresh mountain air. It was so nice to get out of the clouds and the smog, and Chiang Mai's in a valley, so a lot of the exhaust from all the motorbikes and the cars kind of hangs there. It doesn't really feel like a place where you want to take big gulps of air or go run a marathon or something. So getting up into the national park was amazing. And it's really cool because when you get to the highest point, and then you go down a little bit, and there's these two really neat temples, and one symbolizes masculinity, one symbolizes femininity, and you can go see them. There's a garden in between, and I felt like that was definitely a highlight of our time in Chiang Mai.
Yeah, so we were on a tour, so we went quickly from one stop to the next. I think something that would be amazing to do would be to go find your own ride up there and either go there's quite a few hikes available, so spend 4 hours and get a complete break and get up into the mountains and have this cool fresh air and go for a 4-hour hike. I feel like that'd be amazingly refreshing, especially if you've been in Southeast Asia for a while.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something we want to do in the future, just to get up. You go right up to the top, and then there's lots of hiking trails available.
Yeah. It was cool to be on a tour though and get a taste for like some other stuff. We had our tour through Voyagin, which is a company that we're affiliated with. So you can book your tour or read about our experience. There's a blog post up at theworldwonders.com/blog if you want to read more about that experience.
Yeah. And then so around Chiang Mai, there's a couple other towns that are quite popular to visit. There's Chiang Rai, which is a couple hours north, further into the corner, near Myanmar and Laos, which is called the Golden Triangle, which is where a lot of the world's
opium?
Yeah, opiate poppy production is. Chiang Rai's interesting, smaller city, and then there's a town called Pai. So we didn't go to Pai, but we took a day trip to Chiang Rai, and there's two interesting temples, in air quotes, there. Do you want to talk a bit more about those?
Yeah, so there's the White Temple and then the Black House. And so I didn't realize this until we went, but they're both privately owned temples. So
well, I guess the Black House isn't a temple. The White Temple is.
Yeah, so the White Temple and the Black House. The Black House has some very like profane art there, so I think that it's probably actually quite offensive to the Buddhist religion to refer to it as a temple.
A lot of
penises.
A lot of dick.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. But so we went to the White Temple first, and the White Temple is one of the strangest places I've ever been, to be honest. You show up and everything's white. It was crazy, crazy busy. And on the outside, they're kind of on the ground as you walk over this bridge to go into the temple. There's all these hands kind of coming out, these white, like plaster hands, and kind of like devilish looking.
Yeah. So just to
demons.
Back up a tiny bit, there's a whole grounds of interesting buildings. It's not that old. It's kind of 10 years. And it's kind of this like gaudy, sparkly, pristine white stuff, but like there's like silver things all over the place. And then the actual temple is kind of, there's like a pond with a bridge over top of it. And in that pond is where all the pans are. And then you walk into this temple where there's like a wax statue of, spoiler alert, of the Dalai Lama. Bizarre murals.
Ryan and I had to Google if it was real or not. I was like, there's no way that's real. And he's like, I think that's a real monk. And I was like, no, it looks way too much like the Dalai Lama. But yeah, it's like a wax creature in this temple. And what we missed, because we were looking at this wax Dalai Lama, is if you turn around in the temple, there's all this very strange mural artwork that includes things like Harry Potter and Neo from The Matrix and Darth Vader. So just to give you a sense of what this temple is like, it's very different from the other temples that you see in the Chiang Mai area, like Thailand in general.
Very different. Well, I mean, it's not old, and everything else there is, quite old. Now, this is an artist who's kind of taking it upon himself to create contemporary art in line with Buddhism, and it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, he's profiting hugely from it as well, which is cool to see. I mean, I'm a believer in entrepreneurship, so, good on you. And then we continue to the Black House, which clarifies not a temple. It often gets kind of like, oh, did you go to like the White Temple and the Black Temple? But it is a house, and it's essentially like an interpretive art center, sort of. It's,
another kind of entrepreneurial artist who has piece of land and has built some really interesting buildings and sculptures and a lot of phallic stuff.
I think it was an interesting experience. We hired a driver for the day, which is kind of more of our style than a day tour, because you can kind of choose your own adventure that way, choose how long you stay places. It's a little bit of a trek, like, because the Black House is basically right in Chiang Rai, and that's like 2-ish hours outside of Chiang Mai. So it was a full day to experience both, but that was another one of our fun days that we had while in Chiang Mai.
Yeah, and so just on that front, Chiang Rai is actually like a fair-sized city. We kind of thought it was like, oh, there's not much going on there. Let's just do a day trip.
There's totally somebody who's like, oh, really? As they listen to this.
So, yeah, I would think if we were talking to ourselves again, we'd say, yeah, like maybe go up there for a night or two and check it out if you wanted to go.
I think that Pai too, I'm like nearly certain we're going to go back to Chiang Mai at some point in our lives. So I'm not like too torn up about it, but I feel like Pai it sounds really cool. Like, I don't know, kind of like a little hippie town, which maybe not necessarily completely our scene, but I'm sure there's some good restaurants because of that. And I think that sounds like a fun place to experience. So one of the last things that we did outside of Chiang Mai that we really enjoyed was we went up to Doi Suthep for sunrise. And Doi Suthep is a temple on the mountain that's right outside of Chiang Mai. It didn't take us very long to get up there, maybe half an hour by car. There were tons and tons of cyclists who were coming up right around the time of sunrise. But sunrise was a really amazing time to go because it's, once again, really cool up on the mountain. You get to see the monks doing the alm offerings in the morning, or the alm ceremony. And just being at this really famous temple when there's basically nobody there is pretty neat. Definitely.
And to get up there, all around Chiang Mai, to go anywhere, it's possible with these red trucks. So if you're there, by yourself, using these red trucks is interesting. You always get to negotiate with them and barter and feel like you're dying while you're about to die when you're driving around. But if you're there with like a friend or two friends, taking Uber makes your life so much easier. And it's really affordable there. So we took an Uber up to Doi Suthep.
Yeah, and then a red truck down. And especially, too, because we left at like 5 a.m. I feel like Uber was just easier than trying to...
Yeah, but even on the way down, so we were like, we'll take a red truck down, save money. So you'd be sitting in this red truck, 45 minutes later, still haven't left yet. And big groups would come, and they keep telling us to get out of the truck so that they can take this group. Because they won't go until they fill it up. Yeah. So then eventually we just had to pay the full, pay for everyone to get them to finally leave, because we were just we don't want to wait all day.
It was still cheap. It was like $3 each or something. But yeah, just looking at what's going to make the most sense, just depending on how big your party is or like what your budget is as well. We tend to, since we're working as well while we're traveling, time is worth a little bit more for us, because if we plan to spend a half day doing something, then we need to kind of balance that out with getting stuff done as well. So time becomes like worth a little bit more than maybe if you're just backpacking and you've got your entire day to do things and your budget's a little bit lower. But I think that was definitely a highlight for me. I also we stayed in the Nimman area, which is outside of the walled city. It's a really great area for expats, with a ton of good like cafes and restaurants really near to Maya Plaza, which is one of the big malls in town. But going into the walled city is a neat experience. You can see the night market there. You can see, there's like hundreds of Wats, which is the temples. There's like a bunch of different Wat Phos. I'm probably butchering that name. But we went and saw a couple of them. I think maybe like 5.
Yeah, around Chiang Mai, there are many different temples to go to. And we went to a bunch of them. And it definitely has that feeling of like, once you've seen a few, unless you're like a scholar of, Buddhist temples and you have some sort of context or historical significance to put on them, they do kind of blend into one another. Something that I was really trying to do when we were there, I had bought a book on Buddhism and was learning more about the religion. But even with that, it's hard to understand the significance of the temples.
Right, and like what makes them different.
Yeah, the significance
they kind of all look like the same gold building.
The significance of them relative to each other. Like when you go from one to another, okay, what's important about this one? Why is this one built? And that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the one other Thai, I guess sort of like typical backpacker Thai experience that I had is I got a bamboo tattoo, which was something that I kind of regretted not doing the first time we were in Thailand. So I went and got that done. So if anyone is debating doing it, I would definitely recommend it. It hurts way less than a machine tattoo. It heals way faster. Just do your research. Make sure you get like a clean place. But yeah, if you have an idea that you've been thinking about, it's definitely more affordable to do it in Thailand. And the bamboo is really good. Like, I'm glad that I had that experience. I don't know if I'll ever be able to get another tattoo done though.
Just because it's so much more painful with the like electric needle thing.
Yeah, like the gun is so much more painful. or electric needle, whatever you call it. I think it's tattoo gun. But yeah, like I was just, it's on my rib cage, and I seem to have chosen all painful places to get tattoos, but the last one I got done was the top of my neck, and I just kept telling myself that I wasn't going to die and that this was the worst pain I'd experienced till childbirth. And I kind of expected the same, like right on my rib cage. Like I don't have a ton of extra fat on my ribs, like they're pretty bony. And yeah, I mean, it still hurt, but it wasn't like excruciating or anything, and it healed within like maybe 3 days. I'd say it was fully healed. It was itchy for maybe like 3 other days, which is way better than your average tattoo heal time. Yeah.
So just overall, like Chiang Mai is a great city because there's just different options to do what you want to do there. If you're really into nature, there's a ton of opportunities to go hiking, to go to elephant sanctuaries, to go to places a little bit out of town. If you're really
waterfalls,
if you're really
canyons.
into kind of the historic side of things, there are a lot of ancient ruins. Chiang Mai used to be, it was an ancient kingdom, I believe, was based there. And if you're really into food, it's an amazing food city. From the Thai food all the way across Western food, there's great cooking courses. Basically, any range of things, you can find what you're looking for there, while still not being in this massive city that's super hard to get around. So it's a great place for that. And it's kind of one of those places that most people we talk to kind of use it as like a refreshing, like it's a point in time where it's like, oh yeah, we just like ate great food. We maybe went to a movie. We just kind of like relaxed. So if you're on a 3-week adventure, for example, Chiang Mai maybe is a good place to go at the end of it. If you're on like a bigger backpacking trip, maybe it's a good place to slow down for a little while. But it's not going to be like that crazy adventurous place, because there are all the comforts of home there, and there is a large influence of expat culture. So that's something to be aware of.
Yeah, definitely. Like if you're looking for a really like cultural experience.
Yeah, if you're like, I'm really getting out into the wilderness, I'm starting in Chiang Mai.
No.
Like, okay, sweet, meet me by the McDonald's. Let's meet for coffee at Starbucks.
I think that like we talked about some of the things that we did kind of around the city, and I think those were like our days off where we kind of explored, or like our half days that we took to kind of get a feel for Chiang Mai and the surrounding area. But my favorite part about Chiang Mai was that we settled down and had this like really great day-to-day life. Like we had this really cool apartment that was affordable. We were staying in the same building as a yoga studio that with our 10 punch pass was like, I don't know, less than $5 a class. We stayed like right by a delicious vegetarian restaurant. We were kind of within like 10 or 15 minutes walking of all these like amazing restaurants and great coffee shops. We went to the Digital Nomad meetup every Friday afternoon, and we kind of tucked into this like nice, cozy little lifestyle there.
Yeah. And there's an amazing quality of life in Chiang Mai if you have a reasonable amount of savings or income. Food's really affordable but delicious. There's a great community of people there. There's great events to go to. There's great things to see. You can go to the mall and watch all the new Western movies that are coming out for really affordable prices. We made a good friend who was based out of Chiang Mai, so definitely a cool place to go to.
Yeah, and I'm going to be writing a blog post on our top favorite restaurants there, featuring some of the places that we ate at the most. We kind of discovered 5 to 8 restaurants that we really liked, and then just continued to rotate through them because they're so good. So you can stay tuned on the blog for that.
So the last thing we wanted to touch on in Chiang Mai was our experience having this first time of a longer stay somewhere where we're trying to balance out being somewhere new and exploring it, and balancing that with being a bit more settled down and trying to work more and finding a balance between travel and work. Allegedly.
Allegedly.
So what we decided to do previously when we were in Kuala Lumpur, and stick with me here, when we were in Kuala Lumpur, we had, I think, 10 days, and we're like, okay, let's write a list of stuff we're trying to get done. Let's do it. And let's just kind of wing it in terms of work days, non-work days. I think we were both kind of resistant to this idea of like, let's create a work week for ourselves. Because when you're working for yourself, you don't want to do that. You're like, I have freedom. I don't need to exercise it. But in
and like on top of that, it's not like I have freedom in like Calgary, Alberta. It's like I'm in like freaking Kuala Lumpur. Like I want to go do what people do in Kuala Lumpur when they're not working.
AKA escape rooms.
Yeah, like, but I still want to make money being a digital nomad.
Yeah. So,
which has kind of been the entire struggle that we've experienced. You know, like it's taken basically 5 months to get kind of adjusted to that, what that looks like.
So in Chiang Mai, we thought, and this is kind of the important lesson, we were just going to try something new. Like, let's try saying, let's take one day off for sure every week. Like in advance, we know this day we're going to be off doing things. And then there's so many cool events and people to hang out with there that kind of came up in the evening a lot. We'd have stuff going on and then kind of just wing it as days went by, and try to just, be really flexible and not be flexible, but just be open. Like, okay, we're each going to do our own thing, invest our own time as we want, and just schedule things throughout the week. But make sure we commit one day a week to exploring. Yeah. So, what do you think you learned out of Chiang Mai about finding that balance between exploring and normal life?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've reflected on this, and I've reflected on it and compared it to the other places.
I've reflected on this.
And compared it to the other places we've been, i.e. Ubud, which has been the other, where we're currently recording from, and the other place that we've spent like a long period of time in. I think that having the one scheduled day off is actually really important. Something that people might find really interesting to hear, especially if you are a family member or a friend who has a certain perception about the way in which we live, is that it's actually really hard for us to take time off. Like we balance so many different things and projects that we're working on that, you know, if you don't have a scheduled day off, you end up being like, okay, well, we'll take Thursday off, but I've got a call in the morning, but it'll just be quick. So it's like mostly a day off, but you're still doing something. And it's funny because I was talking to a yoga teacher this morning, and she's like, I finally have a Saturday off. And I was like, what are you doing for it? She's like, you're going to laugh. I'm getting a photo shoot done for my website. And I was like, it's like a fun day off, but that's definitely not like, you know, it's like doing something you love, but it's not a day off. So it's hard to balance, especially when you do something like when part of what you do is a travel podcast or a travel blog. You know, it's like going on a tour that's sponsored still means like taking notes and paying attention and taking photos and figuring out what you're going to write about. Or if you're going somewhere cool like Myanmar, it's taking audio clips so that we can make a great episode for you guys. It's not just like la la la, the same way it was when we went to like South America. So having the scheduled day off, I think, was good, because I think it kind of encouraged us or forced us a little bit to be like, okay, like no laptops today. What are we going to go explore? Where are we going to go eat? What are we going to do? I think that having a to-do list was also really good, like a goals list. And we gave ourselves...
Yeah, not a to-do list. It was
a goals list.
It's like a check boxes with completed projects and then like a defined celebration. Yeah.
And I think the reward is really key. It kind of makes me think of like training an animal, or like the way that parents sometimes like convince children to do things like chores or dishes. But I don't know, like that stuff works. Like I just kept being like luxury movie. Like every time I was like, I don't want to do this, I just channeled like luxury movie.
Yeah, and I think it's really good too, because then it associates just like good times with getting stuff done. Whereas, you know, it can become a slog sometimes if you're just focusing on doing things and you move on from one thing to the next thing. You kind of feel like in this state of incompleteness. I feel like it's been really helpful for us to just take moments and appreciate how good things are going, and
Totally.
how we've accomplished something.
Yeah. And then also having moments where you can go celebrate, like celebrating by going to a luxury movie is this way of being like, wow, I'm still spending way less than I would on a regular movie at home. And I've got this sweet lazy boy and this like Thai woman who's bringing me popcorn service and is super polite and is here to like make my time at the movies this like really great experience. You know, you can celebrate in a way like that. It just is a great reminder of how good it is to like be abroad. I think that there's been points, and I think that we may have touched on this in our digital nomad episode. There's been points where it's easy to forget how, I guess, I don't know if I want to use the word lucky, but like, you know, lucky we are, how good we have it, or how great this like life design we've created for ourselves is. Yet when you're like in a studio apartment all day and you take a break to go for lunch and it's the first time you've been outside and you're like, wow, I'm like in Chiang Mai and I haven't seen any of Chiang Mai because I'm just trying to like hustle constantly. It can kind of feel, I guess, like less exciting.
Well, yeah. So you kind of mentioned it. Chiang Mai, we rented a studio apartment and we're just trying to work there. And that's something that's been interesting. Trying to figure out how to structure your environment so that you can be really productive. I think it's something that when you're working in an office, you kind of underestimate the importance of a physical space to work. And when there's no separation between your home life and your work life, especially the case in a studio apartment, when you've got a one bedroom and you've got like a study or something, it's hard. But you still have that room that's for work. Where your studio apartment, it's easy to find yourself in bed on your telephone and cell phone, on your cell phone, being like, oh wow, I've been on like YouTube for an hour. And you're like, I don't even know how I got on my bed. Why am I lying here?
It's like all it took was 7 steps from your desk to get there.
Yeah, but I think this is one of like the beautiful things about being someone who is traveling and working, because you get this constant experimentation in a way that you don't get if you're, at home in your apartment in the same city for like 7 months. Here we're going, week by week, month by month. There's always something new about our environment. So you learn a lot about how you work because you're forced into all these different situations. Like you get to go to a co-working space. You're like, okay, this works for these type of things, but doesn't for these. You have a studio apartment. Okay, this works for this, but not for that. Hostels, same thing. You learn way more about yourself because you get to pay attention in so many different situations.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. I think that you put that really well. How did you find like scheduling in the 1 day a week break was for you? Yeah,
so I think I mentioned it a little bit, but coming from a work environment, I was really resistant to create a work week for myself. And I'm someone who's like, I'm doing everything I love to do. I don't really consider any of it work. But I also know that I need to make decisions that are good for the long term, for my long term energy. And if I just like, I'm going to sit and do stuff on my computer, or think about things all the time, then I'm going to be burnt out and less productive. So, having 1 day where we're like dedicating it to adventure was really, really good for me, and just relaxing to just have a switch where I can like psychologically, like, okay, I'm not going to worry about things today. I'm going to get them done the next day. That was really big.
I think also creating that expectation with the places that you work. Like I created that with the yoga studio that I work for that's back in Canada, which is one of my remote gigs, is like, like, oh, sorry, you didn't hear back from me yesterday. Like just as an FYI, Sundays are my day off.
Yeah. And something that's really cool about working from Asia is that you're working during the night at home. So you kind of have this process where you wake up in the morning and the day is about to end. So you can kind of catch up with people, check in, and then you have this peaceful time during your day here where you get stuff done, but there's no interruptions, checking in with people again at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's like sending that email Monday morning. It's like actually Sunday night. He's like, what do you mean you don't work Sundays?
But so you get to set the boundary. There's this kind of like automatic boundary that people accept. It's like, oh yeah, Rat's not going to reply to me for 7 hours, so don't need to worry about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was really good. And I think it's something we're learning too. I think I'm getting more and more towards, even though we're going to be moving places, but putting more structure in weekly, like knowing, okay, every Tuesday I'm not going to do any work, something like that. Or even other days. I think something I'm thinking about implementing is one day where I just focus on all my like non-essential stuff. So that's like, oh, this is the day I do laundry, get haircuts, catch up on reading articles that I'm storing up in tabs on my Chrome.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting when you make a transition from being in like a structured job to creating your own schedule, especially if you come from like a traditional schooling background, because basically from the time that you were really, really small, your schedule's been set for you. So all of a sudden when you like don't have somebody setting your schedule, it's very confusing to set your own schedule. And it's easy to play within inside the rules of what you know. And we've since Chiang Mai experimented with not having Sundays off. We're like, why are we taking this day off that everyone else takes off, where everything's busy? All the breakfast restaurants are packed. Why don't we go on Wednesday instead? Yeah, it's definitely been an interesting sort of experimentation. And looking back on Chiang Mai, I'm so grateful for that month there, because I feel like we should have had it in October when we first went to Asia, which is what you originally wanted. I feel like, you know, if you're listening and you're thinking of going on a trip and you're going to be working, I would definitely recommend like one of the digital nomad hubs. Like go to somewhere like Chiang Mai or Ho Chi Minh City or Ubud or Bali in general. Like go somewhere and give yourself the time to set up your routine.
Yeah. And so this is something I think we're learning as well, is just that I think before when we started, there was this resistance about like trying to have all this magic about traveling. And now we're starting to realize that, okay, we've got to still kind of schedule it in. Like it's still amazing to be in a new place, and it allows you to go out and explore on an afternoon or a day off, and have this fun experience in a new city. But that feeling you get where you're just traveling and you're completely free of responsibilities, that's something we have to kind of like build in. So it's like we can stay somewhere 2-3 months and then go for 3 weeks to a new place and just have it be an adventure. But we can't have it be an adventure all the time.
Yeah.
And still have work, because then you're just going to be stressing about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's trying to find like the best of both worlds and the balance between the two. I think that when people imagine a life of, you know, getting paid to travel, you imagine travel. You imagine like you've had experience traveling with no responsibilities, and you imagine that it's going to be the same way. And that's definitely like what I thought. I hadn't really processed it as, okay, I'm going to actually have to like dedicate time to things. Or I was like, oh, it's no big deal. I'll just work like 2 hours in the morning. And, you know, that stuff is like easier said than done. But Chiang Mai is one of the most amazing places to do something like that. Even if you're somebody who is on a long backpacking trip and you just need time to catch up on emails or to like write your travel blog, or if you have an idea for a lifestyle blog, or you want to set something up online, or you just want to like pop down to work on Upwork for a couple weeks, Chiang Mai is amazing because there's great Wi-Fi everywhere. There's great service. There's amazing restaurants. There's all the luxuries of home at Thailand prices. And if you don't want the luxuries of home, there's hole-in-the-wall street food restaurants with unreal pad Thai, and you know all the other good Thai goodies.
Yeah, one last idea to leave to anyone. If you're someone who's like, oh, I don't really have that much savings, not enough to go travel for an extended period of time, and you've really thought, oh, maybe it'd be cool if I could find a remote work opportunity. Going to a city like Chiang Mai, where you're like, oh, I'm going to book my ticket there and I'm going to go to all the entrepreneurial meetups, because there are entrepreneurs there who are in the early stages of their business and need help, but probably don't have the defined roles, or really know what it is. But if you're someone who shows up and goes and networks there, there's a ton of opportunity, and you can find those remote roles, because everyone there is remote. So no one's looking to set up an office. And if you go network and find ways to help people for free, you can quickly set yourself up with a remote job.
Definitely.
Or create one for yourself, not set yourself up. Just an idea.
Yeah, definitely. I love it. Awesome. Do you have anything else that you want to share about Chiang Mai?
We will be going back there in the future, so.
Yeah, definitely. And so we'll put photos, links to the other blog posts that we've written about Chiang Mai, with more, I guess, details about things to do, things to see, places to eat. So definitely check that out on theworldwanderers.com. And as always, thanks for listening.
Peace. To find more information, relevant links, and photos talked about in this week's episode, check out theworldwanderers.com.
If you have a question, comment, or feedback, send us an email at info@theworldwanderers.com. Join our community on Facebook at The World Wanderers or on Twitter at World Wanderers 1. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Have a great day.
Bye.